This notorious Christmas character is dividing a country. Neo-Nazis in the Netherlands have responded violently to calls to get rid of Santa's blackface holiday assistant. This story has been updated to reflect the latest news. To celebrate December 5th, the Dutch St. Nicholas holiday, Netherlanders gather for parades in which the saint in Dutch, Sinterklaas, arrives in town to hand out candy and gifts. But these parades have taken on an increasingly political and violent tone this year because of Santa's traditional blackface sidekick. In the Dutch tradition, Sinterklaas has a helper named Zwarte Piet, or Black Pete, who usually appears as a blackface character with large gold earrings and exaggerated lips. In the weeks leading up to the saint's name day, cities and towns host parades featuring hundreds of white people dressed as Pete. Stores stock up with Zwarte Piet costumes, merchandise, and baked goods, while adults visit children's homes and schools dressed as Sinterklaas and Pete. Who was St. Nicholas? Jolly old St. Nick might be the inspiration for Santa Claus, but his origin story isn't exactly jolly. Find out why he became a beloved figure all over the world and how his image has changed over the years. Read how Krampus the Christmas devil became cool. The growing number of Netherlanders who are protesting the tradition of St. Nicholas' notorious assistant, however, have faced increasing pushback. This year, white supremacists raised Nazi salutes at the Sinterklaas parade in Hoorn and flew neo-Nazi flags at the one in Zondicht. In Eindhoven, an estimated 250 white extremists chanted racist slogans and threw eggs and beer cans at people peacefully protesting the parade. The attacks received national attention, as did Prime Minister Mark Rutte's statement blaming extremists on both sides for the violence. A difficult history. European street nicks has long had menacing companions like Krampus or Belsnickel, who punish wicked children with much more than a lump of coal. In the Netherlands, the idea that St. Nicholas has a sinister helper goes back centuries. However, the modern Zwarte Piet as he is portrayed today is a more recent invention. Zwarte Piet Black Piet protest. While protests against Black Piet occur every holiday season, some Dutch cities are seeing a pro-blackface backlash by white supporters of the Christmas tradition. The character was popularized in a mid-19th century children's book written by a man who was very interested in the Dutch royal family members, one of whom bought a slave in a slave market in Cairo in the mid-19th century, says Joke Hermes, a professor of media, culture, and citizenship at Holland University. This slave, Hermes suggests, may have helped inspire the character of Zwarte Piet. Before the Netherlands abolished slavery in 1863, the country was deeply involved in the transatlantic slave trade. It grew prosperous by selling enslaved people to the United States or sending them to work in Dutch colonies, and some nobles gifted each other with enslaved black children, who are shown in paintings wearing colorful, Moorish clothing similar to Zwarte Piet's. The exaggerated appearance of Dutch Zwarte Piet costumes may have also been influenced by American blackface minstrel shows, which toured throughout Europe in the mid-19th century. The Dutch tend to argue that Black Piet is a Dutch thing, and other people outside the Netherlands don't understand our culture, says Mitchell Azages, co-founder of New Urban Collective and Kick Out Zwarte Piet. But it is part of an international tradition of racial stereotyping. Pressure from activists like Azages and Quincy Gario, who started the project Zwarte Piet is Racist, Black Piet is Racism, has convinced some cities and many schools to phase blackface out of their celebrations. This year, McDonald's banned employees from dressing as Pete, and the Dutch police announced it won't allow Pete costumes at its holiday parties after 2020. Zwarte Piet or Black Piet. While many in the Netherlands defend the Black Piet character as a fun, harmless tradition, a growing number of voices are calling it racist and offensive. Usually, organizations that ban Zwarte Piet change the character's image instead of getting rid of him completely. In Amsterdam's Sinterklaas parade, Zwarte Piet has become Schuurstein Piet or Chimney Piet, who has soot on his face and a different outfit. This solution isn't satisfying to all anti-Piet activists, but some are just happy to get rid of the more offensive blackface paint and wigs that still appear in most parades. These bans on Zwarte Piet have not come easily. As the movement against the character has grown, so too has organized white supremacy in favor of him. Journalists have received death threats for writing about Zwarte Piet, and anti-blackface activists have survived violent attacks. This November, an article in the Dutch newspaper De Telegraaf accused Azages of being funded by George Soros. a common anti-Semitic smear that often pops up in white supremacist conspiracy theories. These attacks are troubling, but as Ajiz says, he hopes they'll force people who've supported Pete in the past to reflect that if neo-Nazis are on their side, maybe then it's time to really think about this tradition.